Welcome to Primal Girl Wellness and Down to Earth Astrology. I am Ms. Jenny and I am your astrologer. This particular video is a little long. I'm not going to lie, it's a little long. And because of that, I've made sure to put in chapter markers and breaks so that you can stop the video and go away and do other things and come back and pick up where you left off a lot more easily. Now, one of the reasons this video is very long is because it is Saturn in Pisces, and Saturn in Pisces is extremely, Pisces as a rule is a little difficult to understand, but Saturn in Pisces is extremely difficult to understand. So in order for you to get anything good out of this, you need a lot more information, than a bunch of keywords and buzz phrases. So I try to make this video as meaningful as possible, which means that in a lot of ways it is also an astrology lesson. So one of the things about astrology is that you really have to understand the essence of something and the essence of a planet's nature and the sign and its nature to really be able to make a cohesive statement or understanding about what it's trying to tell you. So hopefully we've accomplished that. So I'm going to thank you in advance for getting through the video. If you know somebody who would benefit from this, absolutely share it with them. And, understand that right now we're in some really tricky times. The roosters are coming home to roost. So it's very important that we act with deliberate thought and intention as we move to the next 2.5 years, because Saturn in Pisces not only takes the garbage out, Saturn in Pisces also doesn't give second chances. So we are putting the final fixative in for what we can expect moving forward. So if you could, I think you would benefit a lot if you got through the whole video, even if you have to do it in sections. But there's a lot more here than just, sun signs and keywords for planets. And I think, especially right now in 2023, with things being as, well, just ridiculous and getting more ridiculous by the day, as they are, I think that this will help a lot in terms of making sense of it, and also giving you some navigational tools to get through it. So let's get on with the video. Hey, so there are people who don't know, because I only learned this myself recently, how to navigate these YouTube screens. So here's a little secret for you. So right now, when you're looking at this picture, this should look almost identically to what your YouTube screen looks like right now as you're watching this video. Did you know that there's a super secret way to get in here and look at the chapters and the bookmarks without having to listen to the entire video all over again? There is, and this is how we do it. So if you look at your screen, right, look at all of this, what I want you to do is take your eye down to this little gray box right here, and then I want you to go right here. You're going to see a gray box with some information in it, and at the end of the first couple of sentences, it will say show more. So what I want you to do is take your mouse and click on show more. And when you do that, it's going to take you to the next screen. Now, when you click on that show more button, it's going to expand this entire window out, and you're going to get all of this in here now. So what you should see is, again, you should see this with the date and the year and the description, whatever the description was, right? And that's going to be the first thing we see. The second thing is it's going to give you timestamp bookmarks. Okay, so right here, you're going to get little timestamps for the video. So this is literally a numerical index or chapters inside the video if the video creator has made them. So I put my chapter markers in to make it easier for you guys to pop back in and review any specific section of the video without having to sit through the whole thing. And then the last part is what they call video chapters or video markers. And if you go here at the very bottom, you'll see a thing that's marked chapters. And then underneath, you'll have all these little video blocks, and all these little video blocks are going to correspond to the time markers in your index. So just by doing that, you will be able to go back in and find what you're looking for without having to watch the entire video again. You're welcome. Saturn in Pisces, to serve or to suffer. Pisces is the 12th sign of the zodiac. It represents the last incarnation of the human experience in this lifetime. It is also the 12th house of the zodiac. It represents those hours when it is the darkest hours past midnight, just before the dawn. It rules the magical witching hours when everything is so quiet and so still that even the most vigilant among us find ourselves wanting to nod off and surrender to the seduction of sleep so that we might also dream magical dreams. Pisces rules sleep and the unconscious. It rules dreams and fears. It is symbolized by two fish tethered to each other as they swim in opposite directions, representing the extremes of the human experience and also the limitless potentials with which we can aspire to and achieve, or become lost in a pursuit of. The golden cord tethering each fish keeps them from getting lost. It's also the lifeline between the higher nature and the lower nature, between the supraconsciousness and the physical body. One fish might be swimming upward, struggling against the current, working very, very hard to get to the top of the river like a salmon so that it can do its one final act before death, and that is to create legacy, to leave behind legacy, to be able to go upstream and get there so that it can spawn and reproduce and leave that as its legacy. Or Pisces can go in the other direction and take the path of least resistance and swim to the bottom of whatever allows it an opportunity to escape and hide. Resignation is the experience for the other side of Pisces that has given up and swims with the current, goes with the flow, makes no effort, and just allows life to happen. Pisces rules the 12th house, and the 12th house rules mental institutions, social prisons, hospitals, old age, old people, nursing homes. The 12th house rules the repository, or the holding places, where we put the discards of society, where we put the people that we no longer want or have use for or know what to do with. The 12th house in Pisces also rules saints as well as sinners. In the 12th house, you'll find heroes and saints who walk amongst us unannounced and commit acts of heroism and goodwill and think nothing of it, because for them it's as natural as breathing. You will also find charlatans and con artists and crazy people in the 12th house, people with delusions of grandeur just as easily as they have delusions of being God. It's not normal or typical to find Pisceans who are materially driven, although certainly they do exist. What you'll more often find with a Pisces that's being true to their authentic nature as someone who is driven by a much more high-minded view of the value of life and their time on earth. Someone who is more at home with music and the arts, philosophy, spirituality, all of the higher mind things that give life meaning. Pisces and Neptune are the most misunderstood sign and planet in the zodiac. Most people don't understand them because they're still tied to the material revolution. So the whole Pisces trip and the whole Neptune trip and all that it is and can be and that it's good for is lost on them because they're not there yet. Remember, Pisces, Neptune in the 12th house, represents the final passage, the final revolution of the human experience. They have passed through all other experiences and personalities, all other signs and houses, and now they've come to the conclusion of it here in Pisces, Neptune of the 12th house. Unlike anyone who's been through something can tell you, unless you've been there and had that experience, there's no way to explain it to somebody who hasn't had that experience yet. Pisces also represents solitude and places of solitude, isolation, being stranded, being literally out on your own. Pisces represents those experiences that require you to embrace your faith in something greater than yourself, to lean on and give you strength and direction and support when there's nothing else left. The Piscean trip in this lifetime often has a very difficult cross to bear because so much of it has to do with dealing with the shortcomings of humans and their lack of evolution because they're not there yet, and still needing to find a way to forgive them and believe in them even when they won't do it for themselves. And when we put Saturn in Pisces, now we've got a whole other level of complicated happening. Because Saturn in Pisces is the golden rule personified. It is the grand multiplier of the golden rule times 10. Saturn in Pisces takes out the garbage because Pisces, as the 12th house and the 12th sign and the last incarnation for the human experience, also represents the refuse and the scraps and the things that are thrown away or we don't know what else to do with them. It's the junk drawer in the kitchen where you throw things because it's still good for something, but you don't need it right now and you don't really know what for yet. It's the closet where you put all the things that you really can't use right now and you're not completely sure you want to get rid of it, or the things that you think it goes to something but you don't remember what. It's the place where the broken things go that you're going to fix eventually. Pisces rules refuse, garbage. It also rules people who are considered social throwaways, people who are no longer useful or wanted or have a place in society. The homeless, the old, the mentally infirm, the eccentric artists, the schizophrenics with delusions of religious incarnation, and also those people who were born the wrong time, wrong place, like a fish out of water. Shipwrecks and islands in the middle of the sea. things that disappear in fog, unexplainable mysteries. All of these things come under the auspices of Pisces. And with Saturn in Pisces, we're going to learn more about how all of these things come together and why they are so very, very important. Enter the world of dreams. When builders and dreamers come together, we call them visionaries. When Saturn the builder enters the domain of dreams in Pisces, we discover social architects who are creating a whole new world with their existence. With the Saturn and Pisces experience, it can be challenging or problematic. Oftentimes, people will use the word victim when they talk about Pisces, how Pisces is the perpetual or eternal victim, real or imagined, and that's an unfair label. With Saturn in Pisces, one of the things that is remarkable and notable is that oftentimes there is real victimization occurring, but Saturn requires them to rescue themselves in ways above and beyond what would be expected from anyone else. So a Saturn and Pisces person oftentimes has to fend for themselves or find a way to pull themselves up from the wreckage of an experience with the least amount of support from other people. They may get a helping hand or a life raft thrown to them, but it's only a small effort given to them compared to what they have to do for themselves to get above and away from this experience before it pulls them under. The other thing with Saturn in Pisces is that it can be difficult. It can be difficult for them because they often feel like they're building castles in the sand, building these hopes for the future. You know, these worlds and hopes for the future based on the potential that they see in other people. Pisces, all Pisces, have the ability to see potentials in people that the other person may not even recognize in themselves yet. Pisces has the ability to fall in love with who you could be, who they know you are at some level, if you could just find it for yourself. With Saturn in Pisces, the cost of falling in love with someone's potential rather than the reality that's in front of them comes at a very high price. And also, too, Saturn in Pisces will give people an easier path to exploit or take advantage of that weakness. In transit, for everyone, whether you were born with Saturn in Pisces or not, at this time, while Saturn is traveling through Pisces, one of the things that we're going to have to be very vigilant about is making sure that we understand that, one, no one's going to save us. We have to rescue ourselves. And while people may be able to offer us some limited assist, ultimately, the greatest amount of effort for us to get out of the mess and wreckage that we find ourselves in before we get pulled under too is going to be through our own efforts. We are going to have to fight for our sanity and our spirituality and our saving graces if we really, really want to survive. The other is that we need to be aware that during this time that Saturn is passing through Pisces, the charlatans and the con artists and the people who would happily take it, the opportunists who would happily take advantage of our weakness and our desire to see what's possible as opposed to what's actually in front of us. They will be selling us all sorts of bills of goods. So we have to be vigilant that we are not signing on for a fantasy of what we want to happen with complete disregard for the realities of what this person is offering us in the interim or in the here and now. We have to make sure that we're actually building houses on solid ground, not sand castles that will get washed away in the next wave. The most important thing about Saturn and Pisces is that Saturn is the planet of reality. Saturn is the physical world that we live in. It is the planet of manifestation, because manifestation is when we make things real. Pisces are dreams, our fantasies, our wonderful visions of what's possible. When Saturn and Pisces come together, as they're coming together right now, we're being given an opportunity to create, to manifest, to make real our most wonderful, life-affirming visions and fantasies of the world we want to live in. That potential and ability to build, to take an inspiration or an idea from our minds and make it a physical reality is being presented to us right now. But just like rescuing ourselves, we have to be willing to do the extra work, because no one's going to do it for us. Self-sufficiency, as well as solitude and isolation, are big words that will be operative during this time when Saturn is in Pisces. We must learn to be comfortable with the silence and the solitude if we're going to get the information that we need from higher divine sources that will explain to us and show us and give us the clues and cues to get us in the right direction, to make connections, to make those visions become reality. The hardest part is going to be getting quiet and being in solitude and being okay with that. When people think of Pisces, they often think of warm tropical waters. They always think of beautiful warm beaches and waters and, lots of pretty harmless fish. And we forget that Pisces rules all bodies of water, and certainly the ocean. And the ocean is not a lovely, easy trek along the beach. The ocean is a huge, mysterious place that holds all sorts of secrets under its water. Right under the surface, we could go on for miles, and there are things hidden in the depth and the darkness of the ocean, far from the surface, that we might never know is down there unless we went searching for it. And even then, there's all manners of dangers in there. So when we think of Pisces and we think of the Pisces experience, we want to remember that it is as full of mystery and menace as it is beauty and awe. From sharks that could eat us to beautiful, almost alien, translucent-like jellyfish that could kill us, to shipwrecks, which are symbolic representations of some horrible tragedy that's been buried below the conscious mind for who knows how long and just sits there waiting to be discovered. All of these things are possible with Pisces. So we need to be mindful that when we're entering the Pisces experience, we are entering with the awareness that there are just as many unexpected, scary things as there are beautiful and inspiring things. It doesn't make them bad, but we do need to know they're there. Okay, so with that said, for this video, we're breaking this up into some sections. The first section will be a discussion of transiting Saturn in Pisces on a global or large level, things for all of us to kind of expect for the next 2.5 years as Saturn goes through Pisces. And following that, we're going to do a whole section on history lessons, because it's important to, its context is important when we're doing astrology and we're looking at planetary movements. So it's not enough that Saturn's in Pisces. We want to go back in time and look at the context around these times that Saturn was in Pisces before and what this means in a much more meaningful picture. Okay. The next section we're going to do will be for people who are born with Saturn in Pisces, because they are very special children with very, very special crosses to bear in this lifetime and very special missions. And then we will complete it with the transiting Saturn in Pisces that we're dealing with right now as it goes through everyone's chart, not just people born with them. Okay, so, and there will be some breaks, and this will be a long video. There will be some breaks interspersed in here for you. And obviously, you know, chapter bookmarks as well. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so listen, you know, I just, it's, you know, if you're looking around at what's happening in the world these days and you're just terrified or horrified, or both, it's not just you. It's not just you. And it seems like every day is a new, fresh hell we find ourselves in. So remember, Pisces represents those darkest hours before the dawn, right? You know, it's always darkest before the dawn. And Pisces represents those hours just before sunrise, right? When it's very, very dark and very, very still. And it's the darkest hours after midnight, and it feels like morning will never come. That is Pisces in the 12th house, and with Saturn there, it absolutely drives home that sense of isolation and lack, you know, and hopelessness and despair and depression. Saturn in Pisces brings with its own special form of melancholy and depression. But that is not the whole picture. This is a time of getting right with your spiritual framework, because that's what you're going to need to lean on. It's about understanding the golden rule and really applying it, even when there's no immediate reward in sight for it. Saturn in Pisces is the test of your integrity, not your personality integrity or psychological integrity. It is a test of your spiritual integrity. If you honestly believe that tomorrow will never come and these are the end days, what are you doing? What are you doing? Are you doing anything about it? Are you doing anything good before you go? What are you doing for yourself or for other people that's good and right in the face of this being the end of times, if you believe that? If you don't believe that, again, the same question, like, what are you doing? Are you doing anything good for anybody other than yourself? Right? So it is a test of your spiritual integrity. And in spiritual integrity, it is absolutely about doing the right thing and showing kindness and compassion and charity with modesty and humility. You don't run around announcing to people what a great thing you've done. You do the things that you need to do or that you can do because you can. And even when they're inconvenient, and honestly, sometimes more so, it's even more important that you're doing it when it's inconvenient for you. So listen, any knucklehead can write a check to a charity. That's not that big a deal, right? But, you know, are you able to stop and slow down on the street to help somebody across the street that's struggling on a walker or in a power chair or something like that? You know, even though it's going to make you 5 minutes late, and you're going to have to rush that much more when you get to the other side of the sidewalk. You know, are you getting impatient because the person in front of you can't find the extra 4 pennies in their purse and they clearly are struggling to pay for whatever they've got? You know, or do you just go ahead and give them the extra change just to help them out? And to, you know, stop inconveniencing yourself? Have you given to your local food bank? You know, or are you just running around grumbling and griping about the cost of eggs and your gourmet cheese and your wine, right? and feeling sorry for yourself and how you don't make enough money, blah, 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 and these damn taxes and yada, yada, yada. But in the meantime, you've got food in your fridge that you're throwing out because it's going bad because you never eat it. Have you given to a local food bank recently? So Saturn in Pisces is going to demand from all of us, from all corners of the globe, to look deep and hard and honestly within ourselves about our actual spiritual integrity. Where are we, even when it's inconvenient for us, making the time and effort to show or offer kindness, compassion, and charity in the spirit of modesty and humility? Are you doing it? When was the last time you did it? These are the things that matter. So Saturn in Pisces, while it's passing through for the next couple of years, could be depressing as all hell, because and it's like this every time. The last time, or last few times, Saturn was in Pisces. One time we were literally talk about being caught between a rock and a hard place. So Saturn was in Pisces, and we were literally between the Great Depression and World War II. We were literally going from one right into the other. I can't think of a more depressing time than that. The next time after that, we were in Vietnam, for God's sakes. Remember Vietnam? Remember the 60s and all the insanity and the cultural revolution, the social revolution happening? Because you had civil rights, you had women's rights, you had the anti-war protesters, you had this, you had that. Oh my God, talk about thinking that the world was coming to an end. I can only imagine how the old-timers in the 1950s, their heads must have been exploding in the 60s, right? So, because that was just pure pandemonium and chaos on top of the Depression. All right, so that was the other Saturn in Pisces. The next Saturn in Pisces after that was in the 90s, right? I don't remember exactly what happened, but assault weapon, a ban on assault weapons had to be put into place in the 90s, right? You know, the Brady Bill, forcing people to get background checks before they bought handguns, had to be put into place. This means that when we're going to the 90s, like everyone's going gun happy. And of course, since then, you know, it's been nothing but massacre after massacre after massacre of our babies in these schools, you know? So, you know, here we are in 2023, and if you think you're depressed now, just remember, it's been worse. We've survived that. We can survive this too. And the fact that it's not as bad as it used to be has a lot to do with the progress we are making. So just remember that. We are making progress. Now, with Saturn and Pisces also too, remember this is a time of quiet and stillness. This is a time for us to go deep, deep, deep down inside ourselves to look at what's literally just kind of fallen to the bottom of our unconsciousness where we've just ignored it, right? And maybe this is the time to get in and pull the garbage out, right? To get all that crap out of there that doesn't need to be there anymore. So this picture that you're looking at right here is an old plane that's literally like sunk to the bottom of the ocean. It's been there God knows how long, right? And it just goes to show if the ocean is your consciousness or your unconsciousness, right? There's all sorts of stuff that have just fallen in there and just drifted to the bottom, quiet as can be, you know, that are just hanging around that maybe don't need to be there anymore. So this would be a great time to get in and explore all the things we had forgotten about so we can get them out of our system one by one because they're not needed. So there's that. And the other thing is while Saturn goes through Pisces over the next couple of years, this is absolutely, and I can't stress this enough because Pluto's going to Aquarius as well. We will be experiencing a stress test on very specific things. One, obviously, our resources. We're going to have a magnificent stress test on that. But more than that, where we're really going to be feeling this acutely is going to have everything to do with mental health, how we take care of our elders, right? You know, the end of life sort of stuff. Homeless people and homelessness issues, houselessness. And also all of the people who don't fit in anywhere in the current models and schemas of society, right? Because Pisces rules all the misfits, the things that don't really fit in so easily in other places. So trans issues, you know, regardless of what side of the issue you fall on, you know, trans issues may continue to be and certainly be a big hotspot over the next couple of years, but more than it being a trans issue, a lot of it will have to do with how we deal with members of society that don't fit in neat compartmentalized blocks, right? People that we don't know what to do with. And when these things happen, just like in the 1930s, when everything looked like it was going to hell in a handbasket, the more chaotic the world becomes, the more hardline, rigid right wing some people get, right? Some people's answer to everything is just control people more. You know, bring down the, was it slam down the iron curtain? That's it. We're, you know, reining them in, kind of thing. And that's never worked. It doesn't work. It's never worked. It didn't work in the 30s. It didn't work in the 60s. It didn't work in the 90s. You know, it's not going to work now. Oh my God. But we still have to find a way to have these conversations and to figure out what to do about these things. Now, interestingly enough, Saturn in Pisces also has to do with our medical system. So we may see a major, and I'm going to warn you now, we may see a major breakdown in our medical systems. And it's not that our medical practitioners are failing us as much as the system has reached the realistic limitations of what it can do under the circumstances. So major overhauls may be necessary, and also matters of integrity, there's that word again, will become absolutely paramount as we move forward when it comes to medicine and healing practices. So, and I know integrity has been a big conversation on my end with a lot of people about medical practitioners and the lack of integrity we're seeing more of, way more of than we should. Now, mind you, I'm going to warn you now, this is not to say that the patients are always right. There's even more. For every one medical practitioner who's lacking in integrity, there's at least 100 more patients who have zero integrity and are literally clogging up the medical system, you know, or making things worse for everybody else. So just because you're not a medical practitioner does not get you off the hook and, you know, make you a saint. So I'm just saying, check yourself. Check yourself. And that's it. This will not be an easy time. Also, too, Saturn in Pisces and Pluto moving into Aquarius right now. Uranus, Neptune. So there is the possibility of new bacterial things. So one of the things that's been happening over the last few years, this is not new, has been the rise of the superbug. So we have drug-resistant viruses that are floating around because people don't take their medications like they're supposed to, you know, and these viruses have a chance to replicate and become stronger because you didn't wipe them out the first time when you should have taken your medication in the dose and, you know, course that you were supposed to, kept mucking around, or like 100 other things. Like, for God's sakes, your doctor went to medical school, listen to him or her. So the thing about it is, as a result of that, what we're looking at is the rise of superbugs. So contagious things that are resistant to drug treatment, or in some cases not treatable by drugs at all, will be on the rise during these next couple of years. So for those of you who are, you know, active in the adult pastimes, as it were, wrap it up for the love of God, because a shot or pills will probably not kill whatever you accidentally end up with. And don't say you weren't warned, because this was your warning. For everybody else, when it comes to things like, well, COVID, whether you believe in it or not, you know, and other potential respiratory viruses that may come along and bacterial stuff, these are all things we need to be mindful of. So understand that the rise of the drug-resistant disease is growing on multiple fronts, and we may see that hit critical mass while Saturn is in Pisces. So I don't know that it's going to be a pandemic, but certainly little micro epidemics everywhere. Okay. I know, so happy, right? There is good news here, so let's go take a look at that. And here, my friends, is the upside to Saturn in Pisces as we go through 2023 and 2024. So the first thing is that with Saturn in Pisces and this particular planetary lineup over the next couple of years, we are in for some really interesting and good stuff. So the first thing is we're looking at the spontaneous expression of playful magic. And for those of you who don't know what this is, I love this. This is so cute. Look at this. This is a platypus. PL, let me write down. P, you're going to give it to me? Oh, I see what it's doing. Okay. PLATYPUS. Platypus. They're so cute. So it's basically a beaver with a duck bill or something. It's like God had a bunch of spare parts and wasn't quite sure what to do with it, so he made a platypus. So with Saturn and Pisces over the next 2 years, 2.5 years, with that and Jupiter and Taurus and then Jupiter and Gemini, we are looking at playful magic. Now, there's going to be some hiccups here with this particular combination, but it won't necessarily be all bad. So certainly we can expect some really like, wow, really? Kind of surprise, like a platypus surprises during this time. Now, this is also going to be a very, very good time in terms of creating things. So if you really needed to, or you weren't sure how you were going to build a bridge to get you from one place to another, this is the time when the impossible can be made possible. So don't let the naysayers, the negative Nellies, and all the, oh, the sky is falling. Like, don't let them get the best of you, because remember, we're all under a spiritual stress test right now. So keeping the faith and being able to maintain your vision is part of testing your spiritual integrity. Don't let the negative Nellies and the naysayers drag you down into their, dark room of despair and resignation. Oh, I swear sometimes, golly, I have enough trouble getting out of bed in the morning. I don't need help staying in bed. I mean, anyway, so Saturn and Jupiter together in Pisces, Taurus, Gemini, this gives us an absolutely amazing opportunity to really build some resourceful bridges that get us from one point to another. So even if it doesn't look like anything you've thought of before, it doesn't mean it's impossible. It means you have to think outside of the box. So think playful magic as we go through the next couple of years, because it's going to be a delight, just a delight. If you can tap into it, you're going to be amazed at what you can pull out of it. Now, the other thing with Saturn and Pisces, what we're also looking for, especially that Uranus and Taurus, are going to be looking for some lucky breaks, which is excellent when we're talking playful magic. So lucky breaks are going to be around for a lot of people at this time. Now, one of the things I want you to know, right? This image is an Egyptian hieroglyph of the Egyptian goddess Ma'at. I think I'm pronouncing it right, Ma'at or Ma'at. And Ma'at is the Egyptian goddess of truth and honesty and justice. Love this goddess. So Ma'at, one of her jobs is to stand in judgment of people after they die. So in Egyptian mythology, when you die, you go before Ma'at, and she takes your heart and she weighs it on a scale. And on it's one of those little like Libra scales, right? So on one scale is your heart, and on the other is a feather. Now, the heavier your heart is with regret, the more regrets you have, the heavier your heart becomes, right? So if your heart is heavier than her feather, right? You cannot pass go. You do not get to go to heaven. You will not go to the good places, okay? And there's this Egyptian dog god or crocodile god who stands by her, and he basically eats your heart, because the heart is considered the center of your soul in Egyptian mythology. So your soul gets eaten by this demon god or whatever, and you're not going to any happy place. So Ma'at and Uranus and Taurus and Saturn and Pisces, watch this space. I'm telling you, for the next 2.5 years, truth and honesty, the integrity of your word, truth and honesty are going to be the big major players as we go through it. And the people who have lost their integrity or show no integrity or who lie and try to deceive will have the worst repercussions from this, because Ma'at is coming to get you. And Saturn in Pisces is definitely like holding your feet to the fire. There are no second chances with this. There is no compromise or negotiation with Saturn in Pisces. It is the golden rule times 10. And one of the golden rules is thou shalt not lie, or act actively try to deceive. So if you are forthright and have integrity and you're good for your word and you're not lying or deliberately misleading or deceiving people, you're going to get a lot of lucky breaks the next couple of years, which is awesome. And for those of you who are looking to build something, right, create something new, trying to find your way out of, from one place to another, and you can't figure out how it's going to happen, that playful magic, because the universe is going to be right there alongside of you, will kick in to expose or show you ingenious things you wouldn't have thought of before in ways you wouldn't have imagined them to be. Okay, now here's something interesting, right? So Saturn and Pisces will remain with Neptune and Pisces. So prior to this, we had Jupiter and Pisces, remember? And Jupiter and Pisces and Saturn and well, not Saturn and Pisces, but Jupiter and Pisces was very much about, the higher mind and doing the right thing and getting all sorts of stuff. So it was Jupiter here with Neptune. Okay, so now Jupiter has moved out of the way, and now we have Saturn. Remember, Jupiter and Saturn are they are mirror images of each other, and they represent social consciousness, right? So it's the boundaries or the limitations of our individual self as it comes into contact with society or communities around us. So we're going from Jupiter, now we're into Saturn. And this means that we are, and because it's with Neptune, this also means that we are now getting into the testing phase. Again, stress test and integrity of our spiritual integrity, right? Kindness, compassion, and charity, modesty and humility, along with honesty. Okay, all of these things are going to make huge differences in how the next couple of years go. And it's literally going to be dramatically different from one person to the other, depending on how much integrity and truth they're operating with, like actual truth, not my version of the truth, or alternate facts, or whatever that delusional nonsense is. Okay, so, and you'll see, like, at the end of the day, you can lie to yourself, you can lie to us, but reality and Saturn and Pisces is not going to lie to you. So you'll see clear as day what your cheap tricks bought you if that's what you're doing. I'm just saying. Now, the other thing is with Saturn and Pisces and Neptune and Pisces, one of the things I would look for is water quality and oil. There's going to be an issue with oil and gases, right? And the Arctic. So let me write this down. So the Arctic ice, right? The Arctic shelf, that's going to be an issue over the next couple of years. Gases and oils and water quality. Now, when we talk about gases, this could also be air or air quality, right? So these are the big things that I would keep an eye on that are going to reach critical, because Saturn is the end of the line, critical mass in 2023, 2024. And the thing to remember is that Saturn in Pisces does not give you second chances. So whatever comes up over the next couple of years, we all collectively must pay attention, and we must get actively involved and do the right thing. We will not get a second chance to undo this. So whatever's happening with these things, we can't keep pretending that, we can't keep kicking the can down the road and assuming that the next generation will take care of it, or the next whoever. Like, we have to address this head on as it happens in the next few years, or we're done. We're just going to be done. So, oh gosh, isn't that terrifying, right? But the good news is, if you do it, you can do it. Now, the other thing too is that with Saturn and Neptune together, the beautiful thing about this is it also represents, especially with all of this, right? It represents a renaissance, an artistic renaissance, a real exploration into untapped, unexplored territories when it comes to arts and music and, beauty and all that sort of stuff. So we may find that this is going to be an incredibly amazing year or 2 years of innovation and invention, and really testing the boundaries and limits of what we thought was reality, but in a good way. In a good way. The other things that I might also suggest at this time with Neptune and Pisces and Saturn and Pisces is, believe it or not, psychedelic therapy. Now, psychedelic therapy, because this also gets into mental health, right, is not new. This is not unknown. They've been using psilocybin, magic mushrooms, and ketamine also as a form of therapy for treatment-resistant depression. Obviously, these things are not good for everybody, but in terms of mental health and people who've been struggling with their mental health that has not been responsive to traditional medications, psychedelic therapy in the next 2 years may blow wide open and finally hit the mainstream and not be quite so like, ugh. Also, too, that suggests that marijuana may become legalized across the board, which would be great. Because Jesus, nobody ever got into a car after smoking a bunch of pot and said, oh, I'm Mario Andretti, let me drive 90 miles down the road. Anybody I've ever known growing up that has smoked pot, like, they can't drive because they drive like little old ladies on Sunday, like, 20 miles an hour. They're so terrified of having an accident. And the most aggressive they ever get is attacking a bag of Cheetos. Like, they don't get in the bar fights, Whew. Give somebody some liquor, they suddenly think they're on the, NASCAR 500 and they're ready to fight everybody. I'm just saying, in terms of the two, one's a little more dangerous than the other. Well, a lot more dangerous. Anyway, so we may see that finally like turn around and change our views on that as a form of medicine and therapy. All right, so there's that. Now also too, this brings us down to Pluto and Aquarius. So now this gets a little weird, right? So it's Saturn and Pisces and Pluto and Aquarius, because they sit next to each other. They don't really see each other. So it's like two siblings that know that the other one's in the house, but they don't really interact with each other because, ew, yuck, why? That's my sibling. But what I would expect are some adjustments, some leaps and adjustments, or things that piggyback off one another. They don't know how to connect yet, but they will. Developments that run parallel to each other in terms of physics, the sciences, like the real abstract sciences, like the whole quantum physics, wave particle. I don't understand it, so I'm really struggling to explain it. Stuff like that. So we may see stuff like that, but also too, what we may see with Saturn and Pisces, Pluto and Aquarius, believe it or not, is the development of underground communities that don't even realize that they're mushrooming up as separate sub-communities that will, in the future, align in such a way that they will become a mighty force together. So, one of the things that we expect to see as we move forward, especially with Pluto going to Aquarius, is the rise of the common man. And more pedestrian stuff and unions and advocacy and all the sort of stuff, like the power is going back to the people, which is good. And unfortunately, it's only happening because there's going to be such a huge need for it, because robotics are going to take away a lot of these jobs and people are really going to be hurting. They're trying to get rid of child labor law restrictions now in some of these places because they wholly and completely expect to put people's kids to work. It's not going anywhere good, because I can guarantee the people who own those companies that are absolutely in favor of reducing or changing the restrictions on child labor laws, their kids are never going to have to go work in a factory. Oh my God. So Pluto and Aquarius will bring the power back to the common man, which is good. But for right now, in the next couple of years, we may see some splintering, not in a harsh way, but in a self-selected sort of way, where people kind of like congealing or coalescing, condensing into smaller sub-communities amongst themselves, which will prove to be a very large and powerful meta group later in a few years. But for right now, it's a necessary thing. And also, too, Saturn and Pisces, Pluto and Aquarius, I would look for a rise in black market stuff, which is kind of interesting. So I know over the last 10 years or so, the repressed perverts are all about, oh, sex trafficking, whoa, oh my God. Listen, I'm more worried about labor trafficking than I am sex trafficking, because the boogeyman in the bushes is not trying to steal your daughter out of the parking lot. Chances are, I don't know who needs to hear this, and don't hate me because I say it, because you know it's true. Like, a lot of these kids that run away are running away from either worse situations at home, and they don't end up trafficked, they end up exploited, which can be a form of trafficking, but it's because they can't get jobs because they're underage, and ultimately whatever was going on at home was so bad that being on the streets was preferable to being at home. Right there says a lot by itself. So there's that. And then, here's the other thing, and this is really going to piss some people off. I hate to tell you, but some of you folks need to know, like, your teenagers, they're volunteering for this. They're not victims, they're volunteers. They're not the angels you think they are. So listen, morality and sex and all this sort of stuff, that conversation aside, I want to say that that represents a very, very tiny percentage of the actual issues we have when it comes to trafficking. Labor exploitation and human labor trafficking is rampant globally, and it is a real problem. And it's going to be a big problem here in the United States as they do things like try to get rid of the restrictions on child labor laws, and all sorts of other nonsense, because they're basically trying to enslave the working class again. And we may see more of that, or certainly more conversations and more spotlighted focus on that in the next couple of years. So the dehumanization of the working class may be the thing that is kind of like ramping up while Saturn's in Pisces. So make sure you're paying attention to it and you're fighting a good fight. Don't let that happen to you. And the final thing on the good note is that if we can get through this with Saturn in Pisces and Pluto in Aquarius, we have the potential to literally turn straw into gold. So the ability to transmogrify or transform or transmute something from one thing to something completely different and much more rarefied and valuable is absolutely within our grasp in the next couple of years. But remember, it's about understanding that whatever we're building with may require a leap of faith and some imagination, and understanding that whatever we're building may not look anything like we think it's supposed to. The other is that the lucky breaks and the assistance and the good stuff that we need is only going to come from honesty and integrity, spiritual integrity. We need to be honest and truthful in our words and our way of living. We need to be good as our word. Okay? And this is a time of great manifestation. We can take those thoughts and turn them into reality if the other requisites are there. We need to get in complete alignment. And if you can get yourself in complete alignment with integrity, you can accomplish things you didn't think were possible. Oh my God, right? Miracles can happen. And the result, the end result, is that from all that, we can literally turn straw into gold. But you got to get through here to get here. So that's the good news. It won't be easy, but the rewards are worth it if you can get through it. But, like anything else that has a lot of value, it's not for everybody. Only a few special people really willing to invest the work and the effort to get there, get those rewards. So there you go. If you needed a reason to get through the suffering and endure this and try to come out a better person, this is your reason why. Hey, now would be a great time to take a break, stand up, and maybe move a little bit. And also, did you remember to like, subscribe, or share? If you didn't, do it now. Your support is appreciated. This sculpture is the sculpture of Sedna, the Inuit or Eskimo goddess. One of the other things that people don't think about too often when they think about Pisces and the water is they don't think about cold water and ice and icebergs. Saturn is cold. It's the cold temperatures. It's the freezing temperatures. Pisces, of course, is the water. With Saturn in Pisces, the energy becomes condensed and contracted, and we have the equivalent of giant ice cubes or icebergs. And whales, Arctic whales and Arctic walruses, and even in the most remote frozen places where there's nothing but water and ice, Saturn and Pisces, we still have life. It's still teeming with life of a very, very special kind. So when we look at Saturn and Pisces, some things we want to consider are, one, the ability, like a camel, the ability to go for long periods of time with very little contact with either other people or the outside world. Solitude and isolation are very much Saturn and Pisces experiences. The ability to get comfortable or be comfortable or needing to even endure these things at all is very much a specifically Saturn and Pisces sort of thing. Now, the Pisces in the water also represents the emotions. So Saturn and Pisces can also represent a chilling effect on the emotional body. If someone is prone to more heated outbursts, this is not necessarily a bad thing. A little cold water is always a good thing, right? But it can also represent some arrested development or trauma that gets frozen in the body. So during the next couple of years, or if you're born with Saturn and Pisces, these are some things to think about. And also, too, it is important to consider the possibility that there is certainly more going on below the surface than we're seeing up at the top. So think of icebergs during this next 2.5 years. So whatever you see from a distance above the water that's visible, consider that there may be like 10 to 50 times more of that below the surface that you can't see. So there may be something much larger at hand than first meets the eye. The other is that when we think about Saturn and Pisces, what we also want to think about is what is the word I'm looking for? Resilience. There is a resilience. There is a remarkable resilience with this placement that is just unparalleled. So Saturn in Pisces gives the ability to endure and to be resilient in the face of extremely limited resources, whether those resources are emotional resources or psychological resources or physical resources. Saturn in Pisces has the ability to be resilient and to survive with very, very little for very long periods of time. So Saturn in Pisces is also the position or the expression of a survivor. So for the next 2.5 years while Saturn is in Pisces, or if you carry it in your birth chart, Saturn in Pisces is an indication of your ability to survive and be resilient even in the face of extremely limited resources. And if you can master that, you'll be rewarded with experiences and sights and vistas around you that no one else will have the opportunity to see or experience. Okay, so let's do some history. Saturn and Pisces, rescuing ourselves. So we're starting this going backwards. We're starting with the Saturn and Pisces that occurred in the 1930s. Specifically, Saturn was in Pisces from 1935 to 1938. And the most notable thing that happened at this time was that the United States Social Security Act was signed into law. Now, understand that the Social Security Act is specifically designed for people 65 and over. And what does Pisces rule? It rules old people in the end of life. The Social Security Act is basically a federal charity. It's a charity trust fund that we all pay into to make sure that our elders are taken care of, even if they don't have children that can take care of them, or if their children are there but can't take care of them. So the Social Security Act in many ways is a form of charity that we give to older people. Charity also comes under the auspices of Pisces. Now, in the 30s, now this is an interesting period of time. We're not going to get too deeply into it, but we certainly need to have context around the Saturn and Pisces transit for it to make more sense. So we're going to start before Saturn and Pisces and then finish on the other side of it. So starting a couple years earlier, from 1934 to 1942, Saturn was in Aquarius. And, you know, at this time, Uranus was also in Taurus. Now, we just went through the Saturn-Uranus square a few years ago, and I'm sure you heard all the astrologers, you know, like wringing their hands and, oh, it's the end of the world, it's a depression, oh my God. So, because we were on a Saturn-Uranus square again, right? And now we're moving into another Saturn return. So here's the thing, in between 1934 and 1942. So in 1931, when while Uranus was in Taurus, it just entered Taurus, the U.S. suffered the worst ever drought in its history, and that led to the Dust Bowl years, because literally the ground was so arid and dry, nothing was growing, and it was just cakey dust everywhere. So every time the wind blew, it was just blowing up dirt and dust, because there was nothing was growing, so nothing could hold the soil down. In 1932, the following year, the Great Depression influenced economies worldwide. More than 24.5% of the population in the United States alone are unemployed. 25%. This is the Great Depression. 25% was the Great Depression in the United States. Over 20% of the workforce are unemployed in the United Kingdom. So we were 24%, the UK was 20%, the Canadian unemployment rate reached 27%, and the German unemployment rate reached nearly 30%. Those were some bad times. So the Great Depression wasn't something that just happened in the United States. This was a global phenomenon, thanks to Saturn in Aquarius and Uranus in Taurus. Now, in 1933, strong winds stripped the topsoil from the drought that affected the farms in the Midwest. So now, on top of all the financial stuff that we had going on, we also didn't have farms. We'd had some farms. We were running out of usable land to farm on top of everything else. So that's 1931, 1932, 1933, and now in 1934, right before Saturn goes into Pisces, due to poverty around the world, political extremism, including fascism, Nazism, and extreme communism, gains followers. Notably, as we just came out of the Saturn-Uranus square, we appear to be heading right back to that. So it's not that Saturn and Uranus brings on these things as much as poverty seems to reinforce or bring this need for political extremism. So there's something to be said for that. Now, when we go to 1935 to 1938, Saturn will be in Pisces, and this is what we're looking at. In 1935, in response to coming out of the Great Depression and trying to stabilize something in the world, our president signed into law the United States Social Security Act. It was a safety net for our older people, right? Very, very important thing, and I don't know anybody who's not appreciative of Social Security being available for their parents and their grandparents right now, and also disabled people if they have to collect Social Security. All right, and so that was 1935. In 1936, Jesse Owens, a United States athlete, won 4 gold medals at the Berlin Olympics. So the 4 gold medals is pretty big, but there's also something really special about Jesse Owens and him winning these 4 gold medals at the Olympics in Germany at this time. In 1937, Amelia Mary Earhart disappeared over the Pacific Ocean during a circumnavigation flight attempt, and no one has seen or heard from her since, and they've never been able to find her airplane or her. And I only put this here because Pisces. Pisces, it's about the things that go missing and mysteriously disappear. And of course, in 1938, Orson Welles' radio adaptation of The World is broadcast and creates all kinds of havoc and chaos because they didn't have televisions back then, for you youngsters who don't know that. So for people listening to this radio show, they honestly thought it was an actual broadcast from the news and that this was actually happening. So it was complete pandemonium as unsuspecting people went into a blind panic thinking that we were under attack by aliens. Woohoo! Fun times. And I put that in there because, well, you know, Neptune, fears, dreams, fantasies. Okay, so now we're moving into, now we finished up the Saturn and Pisces era, right? And then we're moving into Saturn and Aries in 1938, okay? In 1938, Saturn moves into Aries, and in 1939, Germany attacks Poland, and from there starts World War II. Now, what's interesting about World War II is that it ended when Saturn returned to the sign of Cancer, and Cancer, of course, is the sign of family, motherhood, and women. And just like any great ruler will tell you, including the great Genghis Khan, if you want your empire run well and for your community to thrive, put the women in charge. The women will always make sure that the elderly are taken care of, the children are fed, and that the boys are busy. Okay, because the women work in a cooperative nature rather than a dominating nature. So in this particular time period, in the 30s and early 40s, right, it's important because one of the things that we know is that the Great Depression and the financial instability that was happening contributed to the anti-feminist, anti-immigrant, anti-foreigner, anti-Jewish, anti-everything except us around the world, okay? And this, of course, led rise to the disgruntled masses that unified and became the Nazi Party and the Nazi sympathizers. Now, there was a lot of talk when Saturn and Uranus came together this time around in this last 10 years about we're going to have a Great Depression again, and, you know, we're going to have World War III and blah, blah, blah. And some people I really wish would stop practicing astrology because they're not helping things any. So I'm here to tell you, and I put this in here because of that, I'm here to tell you, one, we did not have the Great Depression, so history might echo itself, but it will not repeat itself if you're paying attention and you're trying to do the right thing. Two, we're not going into World War III, okay? Because all the factors that led up to that World War II are not necessarily present now, and I don't think anybody wants to blow up the planet. And three, I want to remind you guys that out of necessity, as some other mentioned, and in the darkest of times, we can still find things that are tremendous lights for people to navigate with and get through life with. And that's when the United States Social Security Act was signed into law, which has been a tremendous saving grace for a lot of people. So we want to hang on to that. We've got some people, it's 2023, we have people who are actively trying to attack that and literally rob the piggy bank, as it were, which is disgraceful. But we're not going to let that happen. We're not going to let that happen. So there you go. Interesting history to look up. And this is what I love, 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 love about Saturn and Pisces, because Saturn and Pisces will take out the garbage. Saturn and Pisces will take out the garbage, and it will let you know in that classic Piscean way that, no, sir, you were wrong. So Jesse Owens is the black athlete that you see standing right here, obviously with the USA shirt on. And he was the only international black hero on the scene. Jesse burst upon the scene in 1936 at the Berlin Olympics in Germany, where he won 4, not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 gold medals, and made a mockery of Adolf Hitler's claim that the German Aryan people were the dominant race. Listen. Okay, before I get into that. So here's Jesse Owens, and standing next to him, right here, is Naoto Tajima of Japan, who won the bronze, and behind them both is Luz Long from Germany, who won the silver. So all of this is to say that if the Adolf Hitler's Nazi claim that the German Aryan people were the dominant race, they would have had all white people on all 3 things, but no, they because Saturn and Pisces, like, you gotta love it, right? The Aryan race is literally sharing the stage with the 4-time gold medal winner, who happens to be black, and also an Asian who won the bronze. So there, so much for the dominant Aryan race. Okay, so Saturn and Pisces taking the garbage out. Now, this brings us up to the 1965-1966 years, which was, again, the years around this time are just as amazing as the years that Saturn was in Pisces. So we're going to take a look at it in context. In this time, the most notable things that happened during the Saturn and Pisces time here was the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Because at that time, blacks were not allowed to, you weren't allowed to shop in the same stores as white people. You weren't allowed to use the same water fountains. You couldn't use the same bathrooms. You couldn't eat in the same restaurants. You couldn't sit at the same tables. Like you were, if you were not white, because I'm pretty sure it was the same thing with the Japanese as well, but there was only a handful of Japanese compared to half a country of blacks. So we noticed it more when it comes to civil rights with the black movement. But you were literally separate and second class in a lot of ways, right? And the Voting Rights Act, believe it or not, before 1965, when this Voting Rights Act was passed into law, you could not vote if you were black. And in some places, they had a voting tax. Like if you wanted to vote, you had to pay a tax to be able to vote. And they did that specifically to keep impoverished blacks. And at that time, all the blacks were impoverished because nobody was paying them any kind of money. Like they couldn't vote because they couldn't afford to pay the voting tax. This is how crazy things were. But in these years when Saturn went into Pisces, took the garbage out, which in this case was garbage thinking, and gave us the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act as laws. So for this, we're going to go backwards a little bit and then come forward. So some notable things that happened just before Saturn went into Pisces. So from 1960 to 1962, Saturn was in Capricorn. During this time, the birth control pill was approved by the FDA and available on the market to women to use. Prior to 1960, women had no options for birth control. I think you had a diaphragm. You had a diaphragm that you could use, and even then you had to get it with your husband's permission. And diaphragms, like condoms, can have holes poked in them. So they're not the most reliable form of birth control if you're involved with somebody who is determined to make you pregnant whether you want to be or not. So there's that. In 1960, the United States sent our first troops into that debacle called Vietnam. And in 1961, the American Civil Rights Movement had the Freedom Riders begin their bus trip through the southern United States, which then, of course, led to all sorts of unpleasant things. In 1962 to 1964, Saturn went to Aquarius. Now, the women's movement, the women's liberation movement, and feminist movement was in its infancy at this time. It was just starting to ramp up and become a force of social change. Because remember, back in the 30s, during World War II, you had all these women that had to go work because the men were off to war. So these women were in the factories making, munitions and, picking up the slack for everything that needed to be made. They were basically taking over the men's jobs because the men were not there to do the jobs. They were in uniform overseas fighting. So you had women for the first time in forever that were now in the workforce outside of the house. And of course, when the men came back from the war, they took their jobs back, naturally, and the women now had to go back to being domestic caretakers, which for not everybody, this is not everyone's cup of tea. Not everybody wants to be a housewife. But up until this point, right up until the 60s, the early 60s, it was believed that because you had a uterus and a set of ovaries, the one thing in life that you needed to be fulfilled was to make babies and stay at home and take care of your family. And that's all you needed, and that's all you should ever want because you had a uterus. So in 1963, Betty Friedan, and I encourage you to go find this book and read it, it's amazing, published her book, The Feminine Mystique. And it's literally a conversation about what women need or want and how this has nothing to do with your biology, right? So this is the beginning of the whole conversation about women as whole human beings with identities outside of their uteruses. So amazing stuff. So we had the pill in 1960, Betty Friedan talking about maybe sometimes a woman wants a little bit more than, getting pregnant and staying home for the rest of her life in 1963. In 1964, the first computer language was developed. It's the Computer Coding Language Basic Beginner's All-Purpose Symbolic Instruction Code was introduced. And that now brings us to 1964 to 1966 when Saturn is in Pisces. So in 1964, we had the Civil Rights Act signed into law. In 1965, it was followed by the Voting Rights Act passed into law. Throughout 1965, we had major race riots popping up all over the country. Now, what's important to understand about the race riots is back in this time, right, there were no race riots prior to this. There were just massacres and lynchings because people didn't fight back because you couldn't. Who were you going to call? The cops? Half the time, the cops were part of the Klan too. So you just didn't fight back, and you just did the best you could. Long history of slavery and all this sort of stuff up until this point. And it was in the 60s when people had finally gotten to the point, and not just blacks, everybody had gotten to the point where they had enough is enough with this. So the pushback, what you're seeing with these race riots, was actually just this explosion of frustration and resentment and years and years and years of anger and rage at being mistreated and treated unfairly just because of the way you looked, like exploding into the consciousness of people and erupting into the streets. So when we think of race riots, we want to remember that in this time, in this context, right, we had a lot of stuff going on in the early 60s, and this was a culmination of decades of social and personal abuse. So, and it wasn't people going after, it wasn't people starting race riots to go after another group just because they were a certain race. It's not like people said, oh yeah, let's go get the Mexicans. Whoa! It wasn't like that. It was literally people saying, I've had enough. I've had enough. And you were pushing back on it. Okay. Now, what's also important in 1965 is that President Lyndon B. Johnson announced his program to create Medicare and to expand its war on poverty. So for anybody out there who's ever been in a situation where you've unfortunately had to receive public assistance in the terms of your health care, which is specifically Medicare, you can thank Lyndon B. Johnson for that. And again, just like the Social Security Act, it is an act of social charity, which is what we expect with Saturn and Pisces. Saturn is the government, Pisces is charity, government charity, that has been instrumental in keeping our society afloat and certainly keeping many people from far, far worse positions than they needed to be in. So it's been a good thing. The Medicare was a good thing. In 1965, from March 7th to the 25th, this is almost an entire month long, led to Bloody Sunday, which is a horrible, honestly, more like a massacre, that involved the Voting Rights March in Alabama with Martin Luther King. And for those of you who didn't know, if you've ever been arrested and had your rights read to you, like you might know that that thing where they read you your rights is called the Miranda rights. Well, surprise, the Miranda rights did not actually come into existence until 1966. And since you probably didn't know this either, they don't actually have to read your Miranda rights anymore. So as a result of the bomber in Boston, the Boston Marathon bombers, they found the one guy in a boat unconscious, wasn't speaking or something to that effect. But because he was not responsive, there was something about, they couldn't read Miranda rights because he wasn't responsive, but there was something about his lack of responsiveness that Homeland Security decided to reword some things. So now they don't have to read you your Miranda rights to establish that you're actually guilty of something. Oh, scary stuff. I didn't have time to look it up. If you're worried about getting arrested and you want to know, you can certainly look that up, but it's a real thing. It's a real thing. Okay, now, after Saturn in Pisces changed over and went to Saturn in Aries, in 1967, we had a Supreme Court case called Loving versus Virginia, or the state of Virginia. And this is basically the right for people to marry who they want. Okay, the state cannot tell you who you can and cannot marry, because in the Constitution, the pursuit of happiness is one of our innate civil liberties, and being able to marry who you love is a civil liberty. That is the pursuit of happiness, assuming, of course, that the person you're trying to marry is of legal age and capable of consent. I'm just saying. So, in 1967, Loving versus Virginia, interracial marriage was argued and won in the Supreme Court on June 12, 1967. And as somebody who's biracial, I am happy to say I'm very pleased that this occurred, because I think interracial, intercultural, everything makes life much, much nicer. Now, in this particular case, Mr. Loving and his wife were married, and they were originally from Virginia. They moved, I think, to New York, and then when they moved back to Virginia, and they've got like 4 kids between them, they were in their house doing absolutely nothing wrong. But you know how people are. People get their noses all bent out of joint about people doing things they don't like. So somebody complained to the local sheriff's department, and these people, literally the police department, showed up at their house at 2 in the morning, banging on the door, telling them that they need to leave the state of Virginia because they were not allowed to live under the same roof, even though they were legally married in Virginia, because interracial stuff, just no, we don't have that around here. And according to them, before the Supreme Court decision, their marriage wasn't actually legal. Can you imagine? So, and just so you know, also right now in the Supreme Court, this is also one of the things that we're revisiting, because this horse's ass Supreme Court judge, oh dear God, Clarence freaking Thomas, and his white wife Ginny, who is also a MAGA supporter. Go figure. He's literally looking at possibly arguing down or getting rid of, or overturning Loving versus Virginia, because apparently he's forgotten that he's not white. Oh my God. Anyway, so more things to keep an eye on. Saturn and Pisces, Sutures. Now, this brings us to more recent history, the 1994 to 1996 period. And during this time, we have the internet, guns, more social reforms, mad cows, and a sheep named Dolly. And again, we're going to go back a couple years and move forward, give us some context. So in 1994, we have Saturn and Pisces with a Uranus-Neptune passage through Capricorn. In 1994, the internet was born. In 1994, there was the don't ask, don't tell policy in the military, which basically meant that you could be discharged for being openly gay at any point, which is just stupid. Anyway, in 1994 also, assault weapons ban was made into law, interestingly. Now, this ban expired in 2004. Here's the interesting thing about that, because assault weapons has been a real point of contention for more than a few years now, because these massacres, these schools, there have been multiple attempts to renew the ban, and none of them has succeeded since 2004. Go figure. It's now 2000. We're almost 24 years in, and they've still not been able to successfully renew that assault weapons ban, which limits how many assault weapons a person can own. Because why would you need more than one, right? Okay, now in 1994 also, the Brady Bill, which is the law that requires background checks for firearms purchases, that the Brady Bill was made into law. Now, also interestingly about the Brady Bill, as we speak in 2023, in a couple of states, I think they've all but thrown it out. So literally, there's no background check now. You can just go in and buy a gun and walk out. I'm not sure. I think it's Texas or Florida, but yeah, that's where we're at these days. Okay. In 1995, we have Uranus and Neptune still in Capricorn. The researchers at Fermilab announced the discovery of the top quark, also known as the truth quark. I know nothing about physics, so I'll let you figure it out, but I thought that was kind of cute. The World Trade Organization goes into effect this year, and as Uranus slid into Aquarius from April, May, June in 1995, that's when the Oklahoma City bombing occurred. It is the deadliest domestic-based terrorist attack in the history of the United States, and the target was a government building. It was also said to be an act of retribution for the FBI and ATS involvement at Ruby Ridge and the Waco siege. and it was linked to right-wing paramilitary groups for the bombing. So there's that. And this was the first of what has become many issues with these particular guys. Just, oh man. Anyway, later that year, around November, Pluto went in Sagittarius. So Uranus, Neptune, Cap, Pluto in Sagittarius, and we had the second longest government shutdown that lasted 21 days. The first longest government shutdown was over a month. It was 34 days, I believe, and it occurred during the Trump administration. In 1996, Saturn was in Pisces, Uranus was in Aquarius now, Neptune was still in Cap, and Pluto has moved into Sagittarius. At this time, we had, you ready? We had mad cow disease, woohoo! And the first successful cloning experiment with a sheep's cells occurred, and the sheep's name is Dolly. Welfare reform also passed at this time. Now, here's what's interesting about welfare reform. So the whole thing was about welfare to work, getting people off of welfare and getting them back to work. The news for these new additions to the labor pool, these new getting off of welfare, going to work labor pool, got worse because the Republican efforts to exempt welfare to work employees from the $5.15 minimum wage further exacerbated the wage problem and inflamed the debate over whether welfare reform is actually helping anyone. So while the Republicans claimed a reduced wage, less than $5.15 an hour, for welfare recipients will make them more attractive to potential employers, Democrats were claiming that welfare recipients are entitled to the same living wage as other Americans. So this, here in 1996, was the beginning, or the most obvious beginning, of what will become class warfare as we move closer to where we are right now. Here's the thing I want you guys to watch, and this is about dollies. So when we talk about cloning, the big thing as we move forward in medicine is literally becoming bioethics, and in this particular case, the ethics of cloning. Now, when we talk about cloning, I know there's a lot of people like, oh, you can't play God, blah, blah, blah. So listen, we have a couple of choices. We can take stem cells from aborted fetal tissue and do things with that to try and make things that help heal and cure people who are here now, drawing breath and participating in the world. And we'd like them to be functional while they do it, or we can clone. So one of the fascinating things that's happening with cloning is we're working towards being able to clone human organs so that we don't have to have animal to human transplants. But it gets into weird stuff, right? This whole business about cloning living things becomes a really weird kind of gray area to get into. And this is going to be more of the conversation that we're going to be dealing with. And the reason this is noticeable or notable is that this occurred when Saturn was in Pisces. So Saturn has a lot to do with following the rules and doing the right things and the limitations of anything that we do, right? And Pisces has a lot to do with mirroring things, right? So, and phantasmagorical sort of stuff really going out there on the far reaches and ledges of the thing. So if you've ever heard the book, The Isle of Dr. Moreau, where he does the experiments with animals, making hybridized animals, it's a little bit like that. Or, I'm sorry, Saturn in Pisces is a little bit like that, but the bioethics and the ethics of cloning is definitely coming under the auspices of Saturn in Pisces, which means that we'll be seeing more discussions about this as we move forward in the future. Okay, and all of this brings us back to now, 2023. So Saturn in Pisces is also the Golden Rule Multiplier. And what this means is that Saturn in Pisces is the Golden Rule. Saturn is the Golden Rule, and Pisces is the multiplier. So take the Golden Rule and multiply it to infinity, or just multiply it. And that is what we're dealing with. So things that we do right now have to be done. If you're going to get through this, because Saturn in Pisces doesn't give you second chances. So if you're going to get through this Saturn and Pisces passage, if any of us are going to get through this Saturn and Pisces passage, come out the other side in a better place, we have to remember that acting in accordance with the Golden Rule is absolutely imperative, from the smallest things that we do to the greatest things that we do, right? There will be no transgressions that will be forgiven. You will get your just punishment for your transgressions, and probably multiplied a couple of times, because the demand for adhering to the golden rule has been multiplied while Saturn is in Pisces. So think about that when you're dealing with people moving forward for the next couple of years. I mean, you should always, but this particular couple of years, this is bigger than ever, right? Bigger and more serious than ever. And never forget that the future is always built on the choices we're making today. So it may seem like a little thing, just a little cheat, it's just a little theft, it's just a little lie, just a little, all of these things become extrapolated and multiplied into much bigger things. Then you end up with a huge mess on your hands at the end of this. So try not to be that person. And this is a great place to take a break, stand up, move around. Remember to like, subscribe, or share. If you haven't done it, do it now. This is the Inuit goddess Sedna by the Nunavut artist, Bart Hanna. And again, the entire video has bookmarks and chapters, so don't be afraid to shut it off at the end of any of these sections and then come back, because you'll be able to find your place when you come back. All right, we'll see you in a few. Now we come to the section for people who are born with Saturn in Pisces. So some other things to consider, you know, planets operate differently whether they're in transit or whether, like Maybelline, you're born with it. Are you born with it? Excuse me. So when we look at Saturn in Pisces, or Pisces actually anywhere in the chart, if it's very strong and prominent in someone's natal profile, some things to keep in mind is that Pisces is a very vulnerable sign. They're shedding all their skins. They're shedding all their defenses. They are on the last ride in the carnival, on their way out and up. Their whole trip in this lifetime is about sloughing off all of the gris-gris and barnacles and calluses and dead skin, all those things that trap them and tie them to the material world, because upon exiting the planet and their body, their mission and their goal on a spiritual level, more deeply than any of the rest of us, and certainly more instinctively, is to move onward and upward and to be liberated from the wheel of material revolution. This is why you'll find that strong Pisces in the chart is not a materialistic person. They're not driven by material rewards. I mean, they won't turn it down, but it's not the big golden reward that really lights their fire in this lifetime. And also, too, just a quick reminder that along with being very vulnerable, because they don't really have a lot of defenses left, you know, they're trying to be open and present and transcendent. They also come in many forms. So Saturn in Pisces in particular is a lot like the hermit crab. So it can be very it can be very resourceful and ingenious in terms of adopting disguises that will protect it. And like the hermit crab, Saturn in Pisces will use whatever is convenient and available and makes the most sense at the moment to create a shield or shelter for itself, even if it's not actually what they should be using. And this is the part where we find these constant conversations about Neptune, Pisces, and drug addiction. Now, mind you, before drugs, it used to be alcohol. So this would have been a conversation about Saturn and Pisces and alcoholism. And also, thanks to the modern constructs of television and the internet, we can now add escapism, not only through drug addiction or alcoholism, but that escapism, that absolute furious refusal to deal with life because they just don't have it in them, right? Or they don't want to, having their little children tantrum. It also applies to excessive TV watching and internet surfing. Neptune rules images and glamour and all of the things that we see, right? The stories that we're told that are encapsulated in a moment and don't necessarily have any real connections or purpose in their walking world, the world they walk around and live in. So with Saturn in Pisces and that vulnerability around that desire to transcend and get past the earthly plane, you will see when it's not working well, there are multiple forms of escape that appear. One of them is to hunker down and shelter in place and sleep, literally to hide under the covers and sleep hours and hours and hours at a time, or to watch TV or surf the internet for hours and hours and hours at a time. Even video game playing, because it's a very visual thing that puts you in this little teeny tiny make-believe world. Even video game playing, hours and hours and hours of it, is a form of escapism when it's not used well. And this literally is up there with drug addiction and alcoholism. We only think of drug addiction and alcoholism because they're the most dramatic, but other things are just as erosive and take their toll on quality of life when we don't pull ourselves out of that tailspin. The other thing about Pisces, and certainly Saturn in Pisces, is that they're often misunderstood because people don't see them for who they are, right? So I use this picture of an octopus because I thought it's just brilliant. I love octopus. So when you look at an octopus, they're not very attractive. They're certainly not very well armed or shielded or protected. They're kind of weird looking, and we don't really know what they do, and they're just kind of floating around. Like jellyfish are a little more interesting to look at because at least jellyfish are pretty, right? Well, one of the things that we know about octopus is that octopus are incredibly smart water creatures. There's something about the octopus that allows them to problem solve in ways that other animals don't, right? So if you put an octopus, if you put a fish in a jar and you close the jar and you put it in the water or the tank, a water tank with an octopus, that octopus will figure out how to unscrew that jar. It's amazing stuff. You know, the octopus will play puzzles. It identifies people. It is an escape artist, which is absolutely a Piscean trait. There's no space too small or too out of reach that an octopus can't escape through. If you have time, I would do some YouTube searches on octopus. But what this is to say is that by just looking at the octopus, you wouldn't know that or see that or honestly even believe it until they showed you what they can do. And then you'd be like, holy cow, I didn't know you had it in you. Jesus. And that's very much Saturn in Pisces as well. When people carry Saturn in Pisces in their natal chart, there's often an underestimation by other people about what they're capable of, for good or bad, for good or bad. So if you carry Saturn in Pisces and you feel like people never see you for who you are and are constantly underestimating you, my friend, do not worry. You, like the octopus, may not look the way that other people feel something valuable should look in their world. But in many ways, you are infinitely beyond the limitations and the low-level standards of whatever it is they're imagining. So your genius is there. And sometimes to remember, my shy friends, it's not for other people to see. Sometimes that genius is best when it's kept hidden and away from people who would not know what to do with it or would take undue advantage of it anyway. And finally, Saturn in Pisces and the pearl and the oyster. So Saturn is always the thing that irritates and hurts us. It's the place where we do our most important growth. And it's never fun. That's like going through puberty. There was nothing fun about going through puberty the first time. And it's not any more fun if you're going through puberty on an emotional, psychological, or spiritual level. There's nothing fun about it. But it is necessary for us to move past that and become who we are and to reach our fullest physical potentials as adults. Puberty is necessary. So Saturn in Pisces also has a lot to do with emotional puberty, right? Psychological or spiritual puberty, the puberty that exists in a non-physical realm. And in this lifetime, you're going to find that it is possible that you continue discovering yourself in situations that seem impossible. right? That you just can't get out of or work around. It's just, why does God hate me? Kind of thing. What did I do in a past life? And there's no easy or simple explanation for this. It just is. The thing to understand about all of this is that whatever it is and however long it takes, this is part of a process. And if you just stay the course and get through it, because Saturn is so much about endurance and Pisces is about resilience. If you can just stay the course and get through this and continue working on being the best version of yourself, what you will end up with is something that other people will not have. And that will be this priceless pearl that has grown out of the thing that has irritated and vexed you so much. There is tremendous value and wealth that is growing inside of you through these difficulties, specific to you and no one else. So stay the course, my friend. Stay the course. So here you are born with Saturn and Pisces, and you are absolutely, in terms of all the zodiac combinations out there, a very special person. And one of the things that makes this particularly challenging is that if you have Saturn and Pisces, you know better than anybody how hard it is to find any meaningful information about what this means and how this plays out in your chart, and even the explanations you're given don't really satisfy. And the reason for that is because Pisces and Neptune are the most misunderstood sign and planet in the zodiac. People often project Pisces and Neptune, no surprise here, right? They project their own crap onto this stuff. So amateur astrologers see Neptune, they instantly go to worst, lowest common denominator. Oh, drug addiction. More experienced astrologers will do the same thing, but also too, they're not coming up with delusions and lies. They're not coming up with anything positive except occasionally music and art. And if you're not musical and you're not an artist, like kind of leaves you out in the cold here. Like, what am I supposed to do with that? So it's not your imagination, and it's that you're not finding meaningful instruction on what to do with this placement. And it's also not because you are incapable of grasping the hidden meaning, in Saturn and Pisces. It's because there's a lot of people who just don't get it. And that's okay, because some secrets aren't meant to be shared with everyone. So with Saturn and Pisces, we're going to kind of go through a couple of things. So the first thing is, in this lifetime, the most important critical thing that you must work on, and you will be given many, many obstacles and many challenges and many reasons to give up on yourself and this idea, but the most important critical thing that you can do, that you're supposed to do in this lifetime, is work on what you believe. And it's not just about, do I believe in heaven? Do I believe in hell? Or, do I believe this is, Sunday, or do I believe it's Tuesday? It's not that simple. This is very much about, what do you believe about yourself, about what's right, what the right thing to do is, the potentials and limitations of other people, what a relationship is supposed to look like, what your life is supposed to look like versus what it can or should look like or will look like. Your belief system is absolutely everything, and it is the final exam that you will take before you leave this lifetime. So when you look, as an example, at your past transgressions in your life, at every moment that you draw a breath and you're standing upright, you have the ability to be a better version of yourself. So when you take stock of where you have failed yourself or other people, the question is not, what have I done? The question is, what do I believe about myself that has allowed me to do this or live at that level or accept this condition as the only acceptable option? What you believe about yourself, your life, other people, the way the world is supposed to work, the way your life is supposed to look, your belief system is absolutely everything, and that is a large part of why you're given the very special challenges and disappointments and abandonments and betrayals and all the sort of stuff that you literally couldn't make this up, because no one would believe you unless they saw it. These are the reasons that you're having these experiences. So work on your belief system and your beliefs about yourself and life and all that sort of stuff, and everything else will fall into place. I promise you. People with Saturn and Pisces are also very sensitive to the mental health of other people. You are deeply sensitive people, and you feel it. Even if you can't articulate it and give words to it, you can feel the distress and suffering of other people. You can feel the goodness and malice of other people. You pick up on things other people won't or can't, which can make it a bit of a struggle because, again, you see potentials, not necessarily realities, because you might see them both, but one is being much more clear than the other. And it's very easy for you as a sign that is working on transcending the material revolution and getting to the divine places and spaces out of here. It's very easy for you to fall in love with people's potentials and kind of eschew or poo-poo the realities of who they are right now. In the words of a very, very famous writer, Dr. Maya Angelou, when people show you who they are, believe them the first time. You, my little fishy friends, need to have that tattooed on your arm where you can see it every time you extend your hand out to accept an agreement or shake hands with somebody. When people show you who they are, believe them the first time. So it's not about their potential, it's about the reality of who you're dealing with. Some people, the reality of what they're presenting and who they are is literally their potential. There's not much improvement after that. So it's what you see is what you get with some people. And other people, there's a huge difference between who they are and the potential of who they could become. But we must always remember that we're dealing with the reality in front of us. If there's potential to work with, we can participate in their growth if they choose to do that, but we can't take them there, we can't make them go there, and we can't believe them into existence. Accept people where they're at. The other thing with Saturn and Pisces has a lot to do with feelings, right? So Pisces is a feeling sign. It's all about emotions and feelings and all this unconscious, nonverbal communication that we have with other people. Pisces is a very psychic position because your radar is so sensitive. Neptune and Pisces, your radar is so sensitive. You're picking up stuff miles away that other people aren't picking up yet. So imagine that this were the United States back in the days of the Wild West, when you had, Native Americans living in tribes peacefully. And then, of course, the cowboys came trying to colonize or conquer the area, right? And of course, the wars, with various parties at this time. And think about, in these old cowboy movies, they talk about like the Indian scout who gets down to the ground and puts his ear next to the ground, right? Or on a railroad track, and looks up and says, it's a large group of horses and men coming. They're, from the east, this kind of thing. And the cowboys looking like, how in the hell did you get that? Now, we know, because we've seen these movies, that what this Native American, scout is picking up are the vibrations on the ground. They're attuned to and sensitive, and their radar is well developed enough that they can hear and feel those really subtle vibrations from miles away that other people can't, right? This is you. So in many ways, you pick up signals and warnings and little pieces of information miles and hours and days well beyond what other people pick up. The problem is because they don't see it or hear it themselves, and because sometimes your radar is so well developed, you're picking up from way off in the distance. It can be easy for people to gaslight you and tell you you're crazy, that and invalidate what you're getting because they can't see it. But again, we go back to beliefs. You have to strengthen and firm up your belief system. You have to know your own mind to know when you're really picking something up or when it's just your fears and imaginations getting the best of you. Because along with being a big feeling sign, you're also a very mental sign. And it's different. It's a different kind of mental than Gemini or Virgo or Aquarius. The mental gymnastics that you do has a lot to do with the higher mind and the higher consciousness. It's a place where there's not really a lot of words we can use. And instead, we have images, pictures, visual things and sensory things, feeling things, you know, gut instincts, all that sort of stuff. But it's all being processed in perception, how we're perceiving things around us. That is the mind. The mind is how we perceive information and stimulus and things. You're very, very mental people, and I say that with love. But the mental fishbowl that you're in is on a much more high, refined place that's full of potentials, right? So it's things that are happening or occurring or that you're reading from a distance that have not come into existence yet. That can be challenging to deal with, but you have to understand that this is how you perceive information. This is how you work with perspective. Your perspective is like a telephoto lens. It's off at a long distance, right? Where someone might be seeing the mountains and the night sky, you're seeing planets and stars. But again, Saturn and Pisces, be here now. We have to deal with the realities right here in front of us. So remember to pull yourself back in once in a while and take into consideration that what you're seeing may not be practical or useful at this moment in time. It's not less valid, it's just as valid, but Saturn requires that these things be practical. So we have to find a way to make them useful and not crazy making. Because with Saturn and Pisces, there's always, you know, the deep concern that we might be losing our minds. And that is because we see, feel, and hear things that other people don't, and they can't validate it for us. And when you're looking up and you swear to God, you see UFOs flying over the house and nobody else sees it, you know, and they're like, oh no, it's just a, not a droid, those air, maybe it's a droid. I'm losing words right now. Hang on. No, it's just a drone. It's not a UFO, it's a drone. I mean, things like this will literally make you start questioning your sanity on a regular basis. So if you have Saturn and Pisces, I'm not saying you're not crazy. But I am saying if you want to avoid becoming crazier or feeling crazy, it's important to remember that you're dealing with like those two fish swimming in opposite directions. You're dealing with dual perspectives at the same time. So like stereo music, you're hearing different things from different levels simultaneously. So you're picking up a lot of additional information that wouldn't be possible if you were just doing it in mono. So there's that, my friends. So, and the last thing I just want to say about this, with Saturn and Pisces, what's interesting, so again, we talked about the unconscious and the emotions, right? And the gaslighting, you know, and the being invalidated by people around you because their radars, they're not hearing hoofbeats miles away, right? The cavalry is coming. It's not a UFO, it's a drone. Okay. So this makes it difficult and oftentimes makes you feel very, very lonely. Saturn and Pisces people are tremendously, tremendously lonely people. And it's not because they want for people around them. It's because deep down they don't feel like anybody really understands. Like they're literally in a whole like secret island under themselves, and they've got this whole like life and language going on that nobody else speaks, and it's just them. And that, my friends, will make anybody crazy. So if you have Saturn and Pisces, this feeling of isolation and loneliness is very strong. This feeling of being misunderstood and people not seeing your potential, you know, all of these things where people are looking at you and looking at the world around you, and it's like you both are having very different experiences of what's happening. You're having a very different experience of who you are, you know, compared to what they think or see or want to see, as well as you're having a very different experience of the world around you. You're picking up on stuff they're totally clueless about. You're hearing hoofbeats in the distance from miles away. You know, you're picking up vibes and sensations from other people that you can't put words to. You know, you're seeing potentials in people that other people can't see. All of these things can make for a very lonely existence. And one of the responses to that for Saturn and Pisces people, because remember, Saturn rules cold and freezing temperatures, and Pisces rules the water. So with Saturn and Pisces people, oftentimes the response is to freeze, either freeze up in their relationships or freeze their emotions. So you get some type of either emotionally arrested development, or you get somebody who has difficulty being intimate and trusting people, right? It's very hard to trust people when, you know, you want to say things and you know that historically your entire life when you say that, people do look at you like you're crazy. So Saturn in Pisces has a lot of work to do in terms of forgiveness, forgiving the people who've done you wrong. And mind you, my Saturn and Pisces friends, you need to know when I say forgive people and turn the other cheek, I'm not saying being a doormat. These are not the same conversation. Remember, when the Christians talk about Jesus and turning the other cheek and forgiving their enemies, or loving their enemies and forgiving people, what they're not also saying, which is clearly written in their holy books, is that Jesus also had no qualm or reservation about whipping moneylenders and turning over tables and banks and having a huge, snarky, anarchist, chaotic fit and really putting people in their place. He's done it. I'm sure he's not proud of it, but he's done it. So it's not turning the other cheek and loving thine enemy and forgiving other people, all these good things that we're supposed to do to be more passive, or more specifically, less hostile and aggressive, does not mean the same thing as being a doormat. So under no circumstances are you expected to be a doormat. But we do have to learn to make peace with the people around us who are simply incapable of doing better. And sometimes making peace means forgiving them and loving them from a distance. What it does not necessarily mean is completely icing up and shutting down and freezing people out, because you need connection as much as anybody else. Some people should be shut out and frozen out. I agree. But you cannot shut out and freeze out the entire world. You must still have connections, soft, warm connections in your life that allow you to breathe and feel safe and feel supported and nurtured. You must find these relationships and cultivate them, because Saturn represents wisdom, and so does Pisces. And together with Saturn and Pisces, you have a tremendous amount of wisdom and support and grace that you can offer other people in their times of need or trauma. You can, when you get yourself together and when you get through all of this, and even before then, at different points in your life, your very special mission has a lot to do with being a Sherpa, or a guide through the underworld, right? The Sherpa through the dangerous, cold, frigid mountains, or the guide that takes people through the underworld safely. Your mission is, with all of this wisdom that you will have developed and all of this self-awareness and self-understanding that you have to do for you to keep your sanity once you're in a whole and healthy place, you have the absolutely golden, rare, and unique ability to shepherd or be a Sherpa for other people who are going through very deep, hard to explain, hard to put into words experiences. Because you won't need words to comfort them. You won't need words to offer them wisdom. You won't need long explanations. You'll be able to give them what they need instinctively, because what you're seeing and hearing is beyond words and the mundane. So you have a special job to do, and it will come to you over and over and over through life. And oftentimes you may not even know that you're doing it until somebody comes back later and says, I wanted to tell you that time, blah, blah, blah. It really, changed my life, saved my life. You may not even know what it is that you did, but you did it. And that is part of your positive work here. So, my friends, if you were born with Saturn and Pisces, understand that obviously life is unfair and people are unfair. And honestly, some people are just selfish little gits. We get that, right? And some people are like, what you see is what you get. Their potential is literally only a couple steps behind what they're presenting to you, and that's not much. And that's okay. There are people who are like that, right? But you need to understand about yourself that for you to get off the material revolution and to get to the next phase of your liberation, which is really on a soul level what you feel instinctively you're trying to do and you need to do, that's where you want to go. That's why sleep is so seductive for you, because it allows you to separate from the material world. That's why escapism in any form is so appealing to you and so soothing to you, because it allows you to disconnect from the noise and the violence of the material world that we live in. All of these things are because that core part of you is moving towards liberation. And the way you're going to get there is you have to know that there is a price that must be paid. And in this lifetime, that price that must be paid is through Saturn and Pisces. And this means that you're going to have experiences and people in your life that people should not have to deal with. You're going to be put in situations where you have to draw upon your own resources to navigate out of whatever situation or condition that you find yourself in with the least amount of support from other people. You will find yourself over and over and over again being abandoned and betrayed by people who could have done more for you and didn't. And you're going to have to learn how to forgive them for that and rely on yourself more. You have to develop your inner strength to navigate these things and situations and recover from them, because your job is to help other people navigate the darkness until it's time for you to move on to the next level of liberation. It's a price that must be paid. It's a very high price. It's not fair. Nobody ever said it was going to be. But remember what you're getting for that, the high price that you're paying, the unfair, excessive price that you're being charged for these rewards that you don't even know what they are, right? Or if they're even worth it. These things that you're paying for, the price that you're paying is for gifts and rewards and blessings that are far and beyond what can be described with words, and certainly what would ever be available to anyone else. So stay the course and know that you're coming in to finish off a lot of toxic situations in this lifetime, toxic relationships. There's no coming back to this. Once these relationships are over and you've done what needs to be done in terms of burning off karma between yourself and this person or these situations, you'll never have to deal with them again. It will be, this is literally end of the line for that. But you have to manage yourself in the process. And to complete this, I just want to tell you guys and agree with you, yeah, Saturn sucks. But as they tell me, discipline and delayed gratification are good for you, and they build character. May not seem like a lot, but it's everything. Okay, so now we're going to get to transiting Saturn and Pisces in your chart, not people born with Saturn and Pisces, but people born with their Saturn anywhere else in their charts. And how Saturn in transit moving through your chart is going to affect you. This transiting Saturn in Pisces moving through the natal chart will apply no matter which revolution of Saturn we're in. So even now moving forward into 2023, let's see, like 2054, even so the next Saturn return will be in 2054. Even when we get to there, this will still apply. So let's take a look. Transiting Saturn in Pisces for the individual. No second chances. And I cannot stress this enough. Anytime Saturn travels through the sign Pisces, situations and circumstances and the people that we find ourselves dealing with at this time, that's it. There are no second chances. So we have to do the right thing and make the best choices, literally make the best choices and do the right thing, because that will set into motion or complete the tumblers in the lock to open or permanently lock us out of what's on the other side of that door. This is it. This is the final test, as it were, to determine whether you're going through this door or that door and what you're going to find on the other side. No second chances. Okay, so this is the part where we go through Saturn in the individual chart. Some things to remember as we're doing this. One, this is literally just a general overview. All of these things are modified by the actual planets and combinations and aspects in your personal chart. So this is a very general overview. The second is that we're doing this based on your sun sign. So again, the more specific, exacting details about how Saturn in Pisces may present itself is specific to your natal chart. Unfortunately, we can't do that with just a sun sign. If you'd like a reading, you can contact me. My email will be in the description box. But for now, this should be enough to get us through. So let's start with Pisces. Saturn and Pisces. Let's start with Pisces. Okay, my Pisces friends. So here, Saturn and Pisces will be rolling through your solar first house. What this means is that this is a time of self-actualization. Typically, if you carry Saturn in Pisces, this is also a very important year or time because Saturn will be on a return. Saturn rolling through the first house or being on a Saturn return indicates that this is a time for taking inventory of stock about your identity and the direction your life is headed and making course corrections. Some people get through Saturn returns very easily. It's not a big deal. Other people, their entire lives fall apart and they have to completely reorient the direction they're heading in because everything they knew and had built their life around, it like literally just gets decimated. All of these things represent course corrections. Saturn in the first house can also lend itself to weight loss. So for those of you who are struggling with your weight or struggling with routines that lead to better weight management, or are in situations where you're just a little too anal loose, and Pisces, you know what I mean, because structure and routine and discipline is not your strong suit. Organization, these are not your strong suit. At this time will come much easier. So if you need to adopt new routines, new structures, or new ways of getting stuff done, new systems for getting things done, this is the time to implement them. It will come easier and more naturally for you, and you'll find that it's just easier to accomplish. For those of you who are too rigid and too controlling, because maybe you already have an excessively active Saturn in your Piscean chart, this can be a depressing time. This can be a time of tremendous restriction and limitation above and beyond what you're already dealing with. Forgiveness, and using wisdom when dealing with yourself and taking your own good advice is absolutely the way to go right now. Okay, so the next sign that we're going to be dealing with, we're going to go in order. No, we're going to do it by signs, water signs, or elements. So the next sign we're going to be dealing with after Pisces is going to be here, and this is Scorpio. So Scorpio, Saturn and Pisces will be going through your fifth house of children, and speculation, and play. Saturn rolling through this house for you can indicate more responsibilities or burdens where children are concerned, and or creative projects. So for those of you who are involved in I don't know, creating stock portfolios, because that's very fifth house stuff, right? Or you have children. The fifth house also, surprisingly enough, also represents our grandparents, which is kind of interesting. So that may be something to keep in mind. You may be dealing with elders in your family. Saturn rolling through the fifth house can also make you feel very, very not sexy, not attractive. So many of you may be going through some new concerns and new feelings about your reproductive self and your value as a dateable, mateable human being. For those of you who are old enough that this is not an issue, and listen, I don't know about you, but I don't know that this is ever not going to be an issue. Saturn in the fifth can also stabilize things in these realms. So you may find that as Saturn rolls to your fifth house, this can be a tremendously powerful time in terms of creativity and self-expression and all of these things you typically don't think of with Saturn, because it will literally help you lean up or cut away the fat. So this is a great time to cut out the noise and the nonsense and get to the absolute essentials. Whether you're an artist or a speculative investor or a parent, this is the time when getting down to no nonsense, bare minimum, essential brass tacks will work wonderfully for you and yield some really nice results. Cancer. Cancer, Saturn will be rolling through your ninth house, and typically this is not a big, fantastic, dramatic kind of transit, But Saturn in the 9th of your solar house, of your solar Cancer house, will definitely put you in a place where you're thinking more about, and you're always thinking about the future, but this is definitely have you thinking more about the future in terms of long-term investments in retirement, and really actively making some plans to protect and prepare for, you know, the future, in the long distance future. So this is a really, really good time. Some of you, maybe if you're thinking about moving over long distances, I will tell you, this is not the time to try and expatriate, or pick up citizenship in another country, or, you know, move across the country. This is not the time to make long distance moves. It's going to be nothing but challenges. There are easier times to do these things. So for those of you who are thinking about moving, or, you know, citizenship, right? This is not the most ideal time to pursue those things. And if you do, understand that it will be bumpy. It will be bumpy. For some of you, as Saturn rules through your 9th house, this may be a time when you take on a more teaching role. So some of you may be finding yourselves in positions to mentor or teach other people who are less experienced in something, and giving you an opportunity to share the fruits of your experience and your wisdom. So if that occurs, absolutely pursue that, you know, give back to the world. Okay, so now the next set of houses we're going to go to will be the earth signs. So we're going to start with Taurus right here. So Taurus, Saturn and Pisces is going to roll through your 11th house, and this is going to be a fantastic opportunity to build the things that you've been dreaming of. So this is a manifesting time for you. As Saturn rolls through your solar 11th house, you will find that your thoughts do and will create reality in tremendous ways. There's a very smooth alignment between the dreams and visions you hold in your head and your ability to almost magically make these things come together so that they can actually happen. This is a very, very strong time, so get your mind right and really pay attention to where your mind is wandering off to, so that you don't waste this opportunity. Virgo, Saturn in Pisces is rolling through your 7th house. This is going to create some strain. So it could go one of two ways, depending on whether you're in or not in a committed relationship. So for those of you who are in a committed relationship, you may find that the relationship is more burdensome now than usual. You may be chafing at the bit a little bit, and actually feeling a little bit suffocated. Part of this is the transit. And also part of this with Saturn rolling through that 7th house is it's asking you to take a realistic look at your partner, and not in a bad way, like, oh my God, I can't believe I married this person, but looking at them in a realistic way in terms of knowing who they are and meeting them where they're at. Virgo is a very idealistic sign, like Pisces, except with Virgo in partnerships, they're idealistic in ways that make their partners a constant improvement project, which is not easy for the partner to live with. So during this time with Saturn rolling through your 7th house, the demand is to fall on the side of wisdom, take a realistic look at who your partner is essentially and where they're at, and to meet them where they're at. Stop trying to make them who they're not. Meet them where they're at and accept that this is who they are and this is how they present in reality, and make your choices accordingly. But again, Saturn rules wisdom. So when you make these choices, fall on the side of wisdom. Okay. Now, for those of you who are single, for the single Virgos out there, this is going to happen in one of two ways. So right now, with Saturn rolling through your 7th house, you're going to be even less inclined for having casual or not valuable relationships than ever before. You're not going to want to deal with people who are not recognizing and treasuring you for all that you have to offer. And you never were before, but now more than ever, your patience with that level of disregard for you is completely gone. So single Virgos will do one of two things over the next couple of years. They will either completely eschew relationships unless it looks like this person is also very, very serious and ready to make a commitment. Or for those of you who are in relationships, this is the time where you're literally going to insist that this person either level up and you guys make a commitment, or the relationship just needs to get out of the way so that you can find somebody who is willing to make that commitment. This is a time of decisions when it comes to your relationships. In terms of business contracts and partnerships, again, be very, very mindful of the details. I know you are, but in this particular case, things that you enter into that are brand new in terms of contractual partnerships maybe more work than reward. So you want to consider that before you get officially engaged to a project or a partner. Okay. And Capricorn, Saturn is rolling through your third house. So this is actually an incredible time for you to shine and share the jewels of your wisdom and your experience and your training and all the things you have to offer in terms of information and people management to the world over the next couple of years. So you will find that this is a time when people lean on you more heavily to help them manage groups of people and situations and or offer assistance in terms of getting other people to level up so that everyone can become more functional. Saturn is rolling through your third house. Also, sometimes it can, depending on where you're at with your life, right? Like a Saturn return for everyone, if your life is not heading the direction it needs to, you may find you are inconveniently interrupted these days, forcing you to make a course correction. With you, because Saturn rules the third house, this may show up in the form of vehicle or transportation issues. If that comes up, this is also, while you're sorting that out, this is a very good time to make some really serious assessments about where you're at in your life and where you're going and how the direction you're traveling in symbolically, is not serving the best and most fitting of who you are. So keep that in mind. All right. And now let's go down to the fire signs. And we're going to start with Aries. So Aries, Saturn and Pisces is rolling through your 12th house. This is not your best time. I'm not going to lie to you. This is not your best time. So Saturn rolling through your 12th house is going to it's going to do a couple of things. So on the one hand, it's going to bring you your score sheet. So your karmic rewards and penalties, the fines you have to pay, will be appearing now. So, and the problem is, Aries operates from such a guileless, not self-aware kind of place that they often don't realize what they've done until after somebody points it out. And this is going to be one of those times when you're going to be receiving rewards and or penalties for things you don't even remember doing. But this is a tremendous time to grow and to actively and consciously work on being a better version of yourself. Saturn in the 12th house, now this is important, Aries, listen to me. Saturn in Aries in the 12th house demands, or Saturn in Aries 12th house, in your 12th house, it demands that you live by the golden rule to the nth degree. You must be bigger and better than that, whatever that is. So the golden rule, living by the golden rule, especially for the next 2.5 years while Saturn is in Pisces in your solar 12th house, is the only way you're going to get through this without being completely traumatized or blindsided. I'm just saying. And Leo, Saturn and Pisces will be rolling through your 8th house. As Saturn rolls through your 8th house, my dear Leos, some things may be challenged. So your support that you've been comfortable and accustomed to receiving from other people may not be there. So the rivers of support may be drying up right now. Also, too, if you have any kind of debt, it's looming large right now. So make sure you stay on top of that and address it as best you can and responsibly. The most important thing to remember right now, remember this word, responsibly. Handle your affairs when it comes to finances that involve other people, either support that people give you or money that you owe people. If you approach it with a sense of integrity and responsibility, you will get through this. But if you eschew these things and try to, play it off like, every day's a sunny day and there's always tomorrow, and all, was it like the like the cartoon character Wimpy in the Popeye cartoons? If you'll loan me a quarter on Tuesday, I'll certainly pay you back on Wednesday. No. No. Take realistic assessment of where you're at with things and put in a structured plan to deal with it, even if it's only small amounts, or if it is, when it comes to resources coming in, even if it's a more structured and smaller or fewer revenue sources coming in, this is the direction we want to go. Don't panic, and also don't be irresponsible. This is a time to get lean and tight and more efficient with mutual finances, whether it's money coming in or money going out. And Sagittarius, Saturn is in Pisces, will be rolling through your 4th house. So my fleet-footed friends who don't like to be home too often, and when you do, you like to party. Saturn traveling through your 4th house is going to require that you really deal with domestic responsibilities, which will feel more burdensome now than ever before. You've got to understand that as Saturn passes through your solar 4th house, one of the things that's happening is this is very much about karmic obligations. These are about life obligations we have to other people that we cannot shirk. So as heavy as the burden might feel and as inconvenient as these things might become, the important thing to understand is, and here's that word again, integrity, we must approach our domestic responsibilities with the integrity that you would want for yourself. Golden rule. So this is not going to be it's not going to be the easiest time. It's not going to be the worst time either, but this is definitely going to be a much more responsible time, and you may find that family and domestic situations require a lot more of your energy and focus than usual. So if that happens, give it to them, and once you get through this, you're going to find that everyone is in a much better position, and you will be thanked for it. But for now, for the next couple of years, while Saturn is going through Pisces, this may be the most thankless job you take on, but it's a necessary one, so do the right thing. And this brings us to the last of our collection, the air signs, and we're going to start with Aquarius. Aquarius, Saturn and Pisces will be rolling through your solar 2nd house. Now, this is kind of a double-edged sword here. So on the one hand, Saturn rolling through your 2nd house is going to tighten up your finances. It's going to make for some lean resources. So there will be no big windfalls right now. However, here's the thing to remember. Aquarius is also ruled by Saturn. Saturn is the ancient ruler of Aquarius. So this has some help and assistance for you. It will be familiar territory for you. So as Saturn goes to your 2nd house of resources over the next couple of years, you may find that a lot of your resources and assets have become harder to find, or you're even losing resources and assets. That's a very lean time, right? Getting down to the essentials, the whole, what is that woman with the if it does not bring you joy, then let it go. So minimalism is going to be a really big word over the next couple of years, but it will not be unpleasant for you. You will probably find, actually, Aquarius, that as you move towards a more minimalist approach to what you actually need to get stuff done, that it frees up a lot of time and energy for you to become a lot more innovative and come up with creative and ingenious things that you would not have come up with otherwise. So this can be a remarkably fruitful time in terms of becoming much more inventive and much more efficient. And Libra, now Libra, you too are also Saturn ruled. One of your ancient rulers is Saturn. Saturn will be moving through your 6th house. So for you, this is a time very much, literally, there's no better expression than to clean house. The 6th house rules our everyday affairs, our schedules, our systems, our housekeeping, our hygiene, mental and physical. Saturn rolling through the 6th house can potentially present as physical issues or medical issues. So you may have a health crisis as Saturn moves through your solar 6th house. But more than anything else, the demand with Saturn moving through that 6th house is that you take a much more committed, efficient approach to hygiene, mental, physical, environmental, all of these things. Also, too, your habits. And again, it's not just your household habits, your physical habits. It's, your work habits, your driving habits, the habits that drive the day, the habits that you don't think about. These are the things that are coming under the microscope during the Saturn transit through your 6th house. This is a very, very good time to check in with yourself and become aware and get rid of anything that is essentially a toxic habit. So if you can do that, you're going to find you're in a much more amazing and rewarded position at the end of this. But for right now, literally the art of the small, it's all the minutia, the details, the habits that drive every day, where you need to take aim, because that is what's going to trip you up. And finally, Gemini, Saturn will be rolling through your solar 10th house. As Saturn rolls through your solar 10th house, my Gemini friends, this is a time of reckoning. So for some Geminis, this is going to be a time of falling from grace. For others, this will be a time of reward and recognition. It's hard to say which it is because it largely depends on what your actions and behaviors have been up to this point. So your report card is coming in right now over the next 2.5 years, and Saturn will absolutely give you a clear indication of where you have lived up or failed to live up to the expectations of you and your life and who you are. Saturn rolling through the 10th house also means that higher ups and authority figures, people who basically write your checks and make sure you have a job, are going to be extremely demanding and difficult to please. There's standards are higher, and they have no sense of humor right now, so don't even go there. This is a time to literally like lace up your bootstraps and get in there and do the work, right? And you know, it's kind of the thing about it is with Saturn rolling through your 10th house, it's kind of late to do that, because at this point, by the time Saturn gets up to that 10th house, anything that you have done or could have done or should have done, it all gets tallied into your report card that's being delivered right now. So you can't really make up for, you can't go back in time. But this is a time to take really honest stock and inventory of who you have been and what you can do, what you can't do, what you should have done, what you shouldn't have done, and be really honest with yourself and make changes moving forward. For those of you who have been underestimating yourself and underutilizing yourself, you know, this is also a time of coming face to face with how you have fallen short of supporting your own self, how you've fallen short of giving yourself the opportunities and the confidence and the credit to move forward and do more. So this is the time when getting really honest about where we're at and what we've done so far and how we have or haven't failed ourselves or other people comes into full clear view. So with that said, there's not too much to do except do the things that you know you're supposed to do. So, and that's it, my friends. This is the Saturn in Pisces transit for the next 2.5 years. It rolls through our individual houses. There's good stuff and bad stuff to be had, but ultimately there's a very specific focus that comes with Saturn in Pisces rolling through our solar houses. Obviously, if you know your time of birth and you have an actual ascendant, this will change everything, because that Saturn will fall in the house that is ruled by Pisces in your natal chart. If you do not have your time of birth, it's okay. We use solar houses. And again, these are guidelines, because all the planets and aspects and combinations in your chart, separate from this, will color and modify what we're seeing here. So hopefully this helps. And if you just use this as a minimum rule to get through the next couple of years, it'll make life a lot easier for you. And remember, Saturn in Pisces, there are no second chances. So do the right thing. Okay, I'd like to thank you all for getting through this video with me. Ooh-wee. Oh my gosh. So if you could, please support the channel with a like, a subscribe, or a share. It means a lot to me. And obviously, feel free to make comments below. Your input is always appreciated by me. And honestly, everybody else who reads the comments section. I know when I go to videos, I read the comments section first. So if you could do that, that would be great. And I'll promise I'll get back to you as soon as I can, if I have an answer to give you. So the other thing is this stone relief. The image is a stone relief of the goddess Ma'at. And the goddess Ma'at refers to the ancient Egyptian concepts, and I thought this was perfect for Saturn and Pisces, the ancient Egyptian concepts of truth, balance, order, harmony, law, morality, and justice. Ma'at was also the goddess who personified these concepts and regulated the stars, the seasons, and the actions of mortals and the deities who brought order from chaos at the moment of creation. Now, she does have an ideological opposite who does all the exact opposite things, and their name was Isfet. And their name means injustice, chaos, violence, or to do evil. So right now, as Saturn moves through Pisces, we are in Ma'at's time, and the call to action has everything to do with truth, harmony, law, morality, and justice, right? And the interpretation of those things can vary depending on who you are and how you live your life, but some things we know to be true universally, right? And if these things cause no harm, if these things are not done out of spite or conceit, if these things are not driven by selfishness, and the lust for power, then typically we're on the right road, okay? But if our actions and deeds are focused on or result in injustice, chaos, violence, or simply doing evil, then we know we're on the wrong road. And that is what we have to work with for the next 2.5 years under Saturn and Pisces. I'm pretty sure that Ma'at, because Ma'at also rules the underworld and she's the gatekeeper to heaven or hell. So she rules the end of life. I'm pretty sure Ma'at was the Saturn and Pisces character herself. All right. You guys take care, and we'll see you soon.